For more on Vice President Biden's tax plan and what defines being rich. Being rich is just being part of this, the CNBC family, I think, Andy PUZDER. Let's bring in our guest, Andy PUZDER, former CKE Restaurants CEO, and Seth HANLON. He's with the Center for American Progress Action Fund. I have no idea what you drive, Andy, and Seth, and it doesn't matter. So who wants to start? I was looking at some of your notes, Seth, but you acknowledge that maybe 400,000 in some cities is not rich. But then again, and I agree with you, these aren't people that necessarily are having trouble going month to month, usually in terms of food and food security, in paying rent, things like that. Right, Seth?
Sure. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I don't know if the labels matter here, whether you want to call it rich or affluent or whatever. It's sort of not the point here, right? I don't think the point is to label people. And there isn't a hard line. The hard line he's drawing is that no one under that gets even a penny of tax increases, right? So that's the point, like, is defining who doesn't even, there's no chance of getting even a penny of tax increase under 400,000. So that's the point. It doesn't mean he's labeling you rich or trying to socket you if you're over 400,000. In fact, if you make exactly 400,000, you're going to get zero tax increase. And if you make just over 400,000, your tax increase will be very, very small because it's going to be only on the marginal income over 400,000. So people making in that kind of like $400,000 to $700,000 are going to have a tax increase of maybe like 1% or less of effective tax rate increase.
Right.
His tax plan's really aimed at the very top, the top 1% or top 0.1%.
We always think, Seth, and I think Andy's going to make that point, that you talk about just taxing these people that can afford it, and eventually it seems there's like trickle-down government to how it finally goes. And Andy, you point out Biden's going to raise $4 trillion in taxes over 10 years to cover $11 trillion in spending on top of $24 trillion in budget deficits over the next decade. So, I mean, not that Republicans have worried about deficits either, Andy, but that doesn't add up, 4 to 11. You need more.
Well, you need a lot more, and you're not going to get it from that income group. If you look at 2018, people that made over $500,000 accounted for about $2.5 trillion in taxable income. And you got to remember, it's taxable income we're looking at. It's not how much you earn. It's your taxable income after deductions. And that the Democrats want to reinstate the SALT deduction. So you're going to find people that make $400,000 or more actually having less than $400,000 in taxable income. But even if you take that $2.5 trillion and assume that's a good number, and you raise taxes 2.6 percentage points, as Biden is proposing, that's $65 billion a year, or $650 billion over 10 years. He's talking about raising taxes by $4 trillion. So even taxing these wealthy people, you're only going to come up with less than 25% of what you need to get to the 4 million number, let alone the 4 trillion number, let alone the 11 trillion number. So you're going to have to tax people. Eventually, he's going to have to tax people that make a lot less than $400,000 a year. In fact, if you look at people making $50,000 to $200,000 a year, that's where really the income is. There's $5.4 trillion in income, which is going to be a very tempting target for somebody that's trying to spend $11 trillion. So I think everybody needs to expect a tax increase, not just the people that make over $400,000 before SALT deductions.
And then, Seth, I don't know if you believe in whether it affects the overall growth rate of an economy, but there are a lot of businesses that aren't coming back, a lot of hangover from this pandemic, and just just philosophically, there's a lot of people that don't think this is the time necessarily for a big tax increase as we try to come out of this.
I mean, I think he's going to have to do a lot of stimulus, in the economy, and his plan does that. And I think we're going to need to do a lot more deficit spending early on. I think there's no doubt. And that's part of the reason that, Moody's and economy.com have said, his plan is much greater for economic growth than the status quo or President Trump, because he's actually going to make investments that we haven't made. But it's like, the people who have lost their businesses, right, or who have lost income are not going to be making 400,000 by definition. So it's only the people that are still doing well who would see any possibility of a tax increase.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.